Well, people think buying an electronic products doesn't really hold value as they depreciate quickly. You buy a mobile phone today and a year later it might only give you about a 50 to 60% of its value. But this technology product right here, I mean not technically right here, because if I had it then I wouldn't be required to make this video. But if this product was available, then you could give 2 to 3 times the amount of cost of its MSRP. Even if you used it for a year in 2020 and tried to resell it, you might still make 2 to 3 times the returns on this particular product right here. Shocking, huh? I'm talking about the Unobtainium, aka graphics card of a computer, and not just any one particular one, but simply all of them. Graphics card like Nvidia RTX 3060 Ti, which originally are priced for about 35,000, may be available for you and me to buy at 60 or 70,000 today. And there was a time in 2021 where if they were available, then they were available for up to a lakh rupee. Which means if you land up buying them at an MSRP, you could have made 2 to 3 times the returns on these cards. Please tell me of any stock that gives you 300% returns within less than 7 to 8 months of buying them. So the question, how did all this really happen? Well, thanks to the global chip shortage, not just graphics card, but many industries overall have gone through a supply and demand mess. But why should this be a worry for any one of us? Well, because we are the demand, the consumers, and the supply chain is broken. Hence, there is inflated prices everywhere. But what caused the global chip shortage and when will it really end? For that, we will have to rewind a bit. The causes of the global chip crisis is a combination of different events with a snowball effect of COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic, of course, being the primary one. You see, everything that we use today contains a processor, also referred simply as a chip. Your mobile has a chip, your computer carries a processor, TV, wearable devices, and even your car. Interesting stat, but cars account for 15% of the global chip production and consumer electronics for about 50% of them. And when you hear companies like Apple producing chips like M1 or A15 for their MacBooks or iPhones, you think Apple is actually creating them in their own factories? Theoretically, no, Apple doesn't really own chip manufacturing plants as well. They do the R&D, design these chips, and for fabrication uses companies like TSMC to produce the chips for them. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. Remember this name well, TSMC. They actually produce chips for major companies like AMD, Apple, Broadcom, MediaTek, and Nvidia. Also remember the RTX 3060 Ti graphics card? The chip for that is actually coming out of these factories, although designed by Nvidia. And when you go to see around which companies are globally producing chips for the entire world, you might be able to narrow them down in the top 3: TSMC, Samsung Foundries, and Intel. Here is a fun way to look at this. Tesla has decided to move to using AMD processors for all their cars. Well, who produces AMD chips? TSMC. All the mobile phones carrying Snapdragon processors from OnePlus, Samsung, Redmi, MI, and who makes all their chips like Snapdragon Exynos? Well, Samsung and TSMC. So the fate of all consumer electronics, cars, airplanes, satellite, military, you name it, including resource giants like Apple, are in the hands of these 3 companies: TSMC, Samsung, and Intel. Now let's see what caused the shortage really. Reason number 1. During the COVID-19 pandemic, an increase in remote work and remote learning caused a surge in demand for computers, networking peripherals, and other consumer electronics with chips. Due to lockdown, chip production facilities were shut down, leading to depletion of these inventories. And even when they restarted, the demand was way beyond the capacity of what they can produce. Reason number 2. The boom in cryptocurrency mining in 2020 and 2021 using graphics card caused many chips which could have been used for regular computers or any other consumer goods instead got used by miners for cryptocurrency. So theoretically, even if Nvidia and TSMC were trying to produce as many chips as possible, crypto miners were still hungry to build their farms and make more money by hashing bitcoins and Ethereum in a time where there were fewer chips available. Reason number 3. Gaming saw some of its best years with people trapped at their homes during COVID. And introduction to game consoles like Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 caused more strains on the development of these chips overall. Any guesses whose processors are inside the latest Xbox Series X and PS5? It's AMD. And who produces chips for AMD? Well, mostly TSMC again. On the other hand, for gamers, Nvidia released some of their best graphics card like RTX 3070, 3080, 3090 in almost a decade. Who produces chips for Nvidia to make these graphics cards possible? TSMC. Reason number 4. Car manufacturers cancelled most of their orders for these chips owing to COVID-19 pandemic. But in reality, people continued buying cars more often than previous years, which resulted in car manufacturers to go back and change their orders, resulting in further mismatch of supply and demand. Reason number 5. Scalpers. Due to this kind of demand and the price increase, scalpers pointed their focus on rare commodities called chips, from processors to graphics card. And since due to the pandemic, most of these sales were happening online, there were all kinds of bots and systems used to buy off chips which would have ideally gone to consumers like you and me at MSRPs, but wasn't available to us. Instead, they were taken away by scalpers and then resold at higher prices. Reason number 6. In September 2020, as a part of the economic conflict between US and China, the US Department of Commerce imposed restrictions on China's largest chip manufacturer, SMIC, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, which made it harder for them to sell to companies with American ties. These restrictions also forced US companies to use other manufacturing plants like TSMC and Samsung, which we have discussed. However, by then they were already producing at their maximum capacity. And then there were many one-off events, like in the March 2021. The Suez Canal was blocked for 6 days, resulting in an estimate of about $9.6 billion worth of trade loss, and a lot of it was chips. In October 2021, thieves really steal the truck of hard-to-find NVIDIA graphics card, like the Fast and the Furious. So in general, TSMC and Samsung foundries are stretched to their best abilities to produce all the chips required on the planet. On the other hand, Intel does have the capacity but not the technology to produce a 3 or 4 nanometer processor technology, at least yet. So when does this all end? Well, recently CEOs of top firms like Lisa Su of AMD and Jensen Huang of Nvidia are predicting things to get better by mid-2022. On the other hand, there are massive investments by TSMC to spend about $100 billion over 3 years to grow capacity. And so is the same case with Samsung and Intel also making investments. TSMC is already setting up a $12 billion plant in Arizona which will start producing chips by 2024. Yes, 2024. So even if things stabilize by mid-2022 as predicted, for the real consumers like you and me to get the benefit of it, it will be still 6 months further away from there, because the local distributors and the suppliers will still try to milk as much as possible from the situation where we are already used to paying higher prices for these products. Unless they themselves reach a tipping point of higher inventory and lesser demand, which might only happen by 2023 in India, price coming back to MSRP seems quite unlikely. But don't worry, I am with you in the same queue. Every day waking up to check if I have received that email from RP Tech saying I am finally the owner of a 3070 or a 3080 graphics card. And I hope that someday will actually come and I will be able to make my own PC at MSRP pricing. If you like this video and want to continue to see my updates on this, then do subscribe to the channel. By the way, do check out this another video about how to buy mobile phones with the right processor benchmarking. I will see you in the next one.